Welcome back. This video we're going to talk all about petticoats. Petticoats, petticoats, and petticoats. For my 1830s Ariel inspired dress, we're continuing on with our series all about the making of that. And so far we've only done undergarments and we're adding more undergarments to that, and that's the petticoats. And it won't be till next video that we talk about the actual outer dress. But with all historical projects, the undergarments are the most fundamental part of these historical looks because they create the shape. And so with a corset, you're creating shape, and then with petticoats, we are creating shape for this look. So with the 1830s, they achieved their full skirts with multiple layers of petticoats. I am only making 3, and I say only because that is considered only. There were lots of petticoats in the 1830s. Starched and corded petticoats were the thing. So around the 1850s is when hoop skirts started coming into fashion, and so that with a layer or two of petticoats created the huge skirts of the 1860s, and then it just continued on through the 1870s and then turned into bustles and lobster tail stuff. And so just a lot of volume is created with boning. But in the 1830s, it was again petticoats. So to create structure with petticoats, there were many tricks that they used. A lot of it was corded or pleats. So you would put a piece of cording or many pieces of cording to get basically structure into that petticoat, kind of like a hoop skirt, but without boning. It's just cording instead. And then also starch, a bunch of starch to help that fabric stay stiff. So I'm going to make 3 different versions of petticoats just based on different pictures and some information I found. One is just a pleated petticoat. Another one is half corded, half pleated. And the last one is a fully corded petticoat. It's not covered in cording, but all the structure is coming from cording. And then all of them will get starched. Anyway, with that, and I don't know how many times I said the word petticoat, and there's probably more to come, we're now gonna dive into making those. Based on a historical reference, the width of these petticoats should be 3 breadths. After some research, that means about 94.5 inches. And then the height is based on you. Skirts in this era are shorter, ending a bit above your ankles. So for me, this is around 36 inches. But you also have to account for all the pleats and cording that will be placed on these petticoats because those take up length as you're making them. So for the volume or width of these petticoats, I decided to make my first petticoat slightly smaller and then add some extra width to the second and third. So with that in mind, the first petticoat has a width of 82 inches, and then for the height, I plan to add about 13 pleats and 8 cordings, and that all needs about 7 inches. So I cut it at 43 inches plus seam allowances. I would recommend doing some test sewing, placing your cording to see how much your cording is actually going to take up. Then you can get an accurate measurement of how much you'll need to add. These petticoats are simple rectangles joined together at the back, leaving an opening of about 13 inches at the waist. Once that opening is hemmed, it's on to sewing around and around and around, inserting the cording and placing pleats. I'm starting off inserting cording right here inside the hem, and then I'm adding a few more rows right above it. Instead of cutting the cord each row, you can simply finish the row with the cording coming out of the seam and then just move it to the next row. And this just eliminates some time and bulk in trying to match up the 2 cording ends in your row. After doing several rows of cording plus some small pleats thrown in, I moved up a few inches and then did some spaced 1/4 inch pleats. Now after doing these, I did want to make sure I wasn't going crooked with my rows. I do have the grain line of the fabric to keep me straight because these are just cut to the grain rectangles. But still, to be safe, I got all what I had sewn ironed and then measured up from the hem to mark the next row of cording. I repeated the measuring process to move on to the next section of pleats. Once I got the desired pleats and cording placed, I gathered up the waist and attached a 3/4 inch band and some ties. For the second petticoat, I'm going to make it about 106 inches wide. This is the main structure petticoat, and I'm adding 12 large rows of cording and 11 small. This will all need about 13 inches, plus since the first petticoat is underneath and making this petticoat slightly more out, I need more length to account for that. So I cut it at 50 inches plus some seam allowance. So in this one, I'm doing no pleats, just cording. I did a mix of large 1/4 inch cording and then the small 1/8 inch cording. For the waistband, it's gathered and I decided on a large 2-inch band with a button closure. Finally, for this third petticoat, I also made it about 106 inches wide, and then for the length, I need even more added length because of the very poofy corded petticoat underneath, so I added 4 inches for that, plus I'm planning to do 22 pleats, which will need about 15 inches. So the height was cut at 54 inches. This one I decided on no cording, I just wanted it to help smooth out all the skirts, and it's a series of pleats in various placement and sizes. I just grouped them based on what would look nice. For the waist of this, I used a dingle hopper. This is my favorite way to do pleats using a fork. It's so handy and achieves perfectly even pleats. After that, I attached a 3/4 inch waistband and ties. And I also tried a closure which I saw in a historical reference, which they say, quote, "Strong tapes are sewed to the end of the band, and sometimes a large buttonhole is made in the band about 2 nails from the end, through which the tape of the opposite end is drawn, which makes the petticoat set neatly to the figure," end quote. This is what I believe they're saying. I did end up needing to make some buttonholes further out from the edge to make it work better, and that actually makes sense considering it says 2 nails from the edge, which is equal to 4.5 inches. So mine should even be set further away from the edge. I feel like this closure did help it fit smoother against the corset and also gave a little variation of how tight or loose you could tie it. Anyway, before I can call these all complete, they need a good old starching. I mixed up a pot of 1 part starch and 1 part water, got a petticoat in there and let it soak for 20 minutes before taking it out and letting it dry. I did this for all 3, and then I poured the leftover starch water back into the empty bottles because I want to save this for next time when I have to restarch them. But anyway, after they're dry, they are like cardboard. Of course, they're all in the wrong shape for a petticoat, so they need a good ironing to get them back into shape. So I found that it was easiest to give them a good spray of water to help soften the starch while I'm ironing. Once it cools and that water has evaporated thanks to the iron, it is still just as starchy, but it's in a smooth, more skirt-like shape. And there you have it, making petticoats for an 1830s look. Overall, these are pretty simple to make, very, rectangle patterns, and then just a lot of stitching, sewing to get those pleats and the cording in place. And then starching it was pretty fun. The ironing definitely took some time, and I kind of think I need to restarch them at this point because it's been over a year since I've made them, and they've been crushed and stored in various places, and they're just not holding their structure very well, so I will have to restarch them. And from my information, they would have to do this when they washed their petticoats. They would have to restarch them every time because as you're washing it, it's gonna wash out the starch. And so you can imagine the amount of ironing that would stack up during this era with all the petticoats needing to be starched and ironed to create shape. I can't even fathom it, and I'm so glad we live in an era where we don't have to have all these yards and yards of ironing to do. But with that, thank you for watching, and as always, thank you to my patrons, YouTube members, and Instagram subscribers for their continued support. And also stay tuned for next video, which will be actually about the visible part of this look, and we are coming to very close to being done with the series, and we get to move on to New Zealand, Narnia, and Hobbit content. So subscribe if you haven't already, and as always, go out there and learn, create, and inspire.